Welcome. We are so excited to welcome you to our session today, getting an insider perspective on how schools review applications. I'm Layla Amiri, the moderator for this session, and we have three incredible panelists with us here today. We have Mr. Christian Essman from Case Western University. We have Dr. James Lynch from the University of Florida, and we have Dr. Radha Nandagopal from Elson Floyd College of Medicine at the University of Washington. So what we have planned for you today is to give you a general overview of what happens to your application once you've submitted it. And then we will speak directly with each of our panelists to give you an insider perspective on what's important for the successful applicant within their application process. So you're going to be familiar. Sorry, I should have shared this slide with you first so you could see our panelists and their affiliations. So I'll keep it up here just for a couple more seconds. Again, Dr. Lynch, Mr. Essman, and Dr. Nandagopal. All right, so life cycle of an application. What happens to your application once you submit it? And we fully appreciate and understand that starting this process happens years in advance, right? So this is really the culmination of the years of work that you've done to get to the time that you're submitting your application. So we know you've taken courses, we know you've committed thousands of hours of service and research and other types of work that you've done to get there. So you're going to submit an application through AMCAS, opens up sometime in May. You can submit the application sometime in early June, depending on when the process can open, and you'll have time to submit that application up through the primary application deadline of the respective schools that you're applying to. So that's something that you're going to keep track of. Then there's this waiting time that you have to wait for your application to be verified. And I know it's a time period that causes some angst and anxiety for many applicants because you're wondering what's going on. Basically, the only thing that needs to be verified during this time is the transcripts that you've submitted. So the folks at AMCAS will go through the transcripts that you've submitted in support of your application, just to ensure that the courses are all entered in correctly and that you're getting credit for all of the work that you've done with all of the classes that you've taken, and reach out to you if there's any areas of question. So this takes about 6 to 8 weeks, right? And this is where we're going to need for you to be patient, and you will have updates from AMCAS as soon as your application's been verified. Now, some schools will begin to engage with applicants as soon as you've submitted an application, and they won't wait for that verification process. Other schools will wait for your application to be verified before they begin interacting and engaging with you. So we're going to talk about the process once the application is verified and it's released to us, the medical school, so we get your full AMCAS primary application with all of the information that you've released to us. Then you're going to receive a secondary from the school. This is a place where some schools will diverge. Some schools will release secondaries to everyone who applies to them. Some have a pre-screening process, and during the pre-screening process, they will decide which applicants should apply to their program or not. So an easy one that is very objective is some schools only accept in-state applicants. And so if you apply to school where you're an out-of-state applicant, they won't release a secondary to you because they don't accept out-of-state applicants. So again, this is something that you're going to think about. And some schools will send out secondaries as soon as they receive information that you've indicated an interest in them, even before your application is released. So that's some of the variance that you'll see in the timing of the secondary. So I know some of you get anxious and a little worried. Well, you know, my friends have all gotten their secondaries. I haven't received mine. This is my school of choice. And so the processes vary a little bit different from school to school. The best place for you to get this information is the website of the schools, any info sessions that they have, any open houses that they have. And again, just be aware that the timing is going to vary. You know, the timing of your verification may vary as well. And I should have mentioned this earlier. So depending on how many schools you've been to, how quickly the schools release the transcripts, and whether or not your school is a school that submits a lot of applications to AMCAS or not, also impacts how quickly your application will be verified. So an easy example is our military applicants, because they've often have deployments around the country and even outside of the country. They have piecemeal applications, that transcripts that come to us, and it's, you know, over a period of time. And so sometimes it takes a little bit longer to have that verified. Again, not a reason for concern. You're going to stay on the ball. You're going to keep an eye on it. But again, understand that the timing will vary from school to school. Okay. I have some color coding in these slides, and that's because, you know, where the ball moves and whose court it's in. So the secondary, filling out the secondary is under your control. You'll decide which secondaries you want to complete. You know, that comes with asking you for additional information, submitting some secondary application fees. You'll work very carefully with your pre-med advisors and members of the committee that are helping you prepare your application at your institution, so that you can decide which one you want to submit. So this is a part of the application that's really up to you. You'll prioritize the secondaries and submit the ones that are the ones that you want to submit to first. Okay, then we get a completed application. So the completed application will vary from school to school. So for some, it's just the primary and the secondary. Some schools will ask you to take some situated judgment tests. So if there's a SJT that you need to complete, you have to be sure that you've completed that. Some schools will have your application complete in the absence of letters, and then the letters come later in the process. For some schools, the letters of recommendation have to be there in order for your application to be complete. So you moving from completed application to screening, again, will vary in time depending on the schools to which you're applying and what their process is. Again, comb through schools' websites, comb through the medical school admissions requirements, the MSAR book, to see what the process is for the different schools. But pretty much screening will happen all season. So applications will be screened and reviewed, and the process will vary from program to program. Some schools will have a pre-screening process in place, and then it goes to the committee. You know, it varies from the different processes. But again, the screening piece is where the school will look holistically and thoroughly at everything that you've submitted to them in support of your candidacy, to make a decision to invite you for interview. The interview process is the next stage of this marathon, right? So generally something around 9 to 10 months is how long it takes for us to be engaged in interviewing applicants. So some schools will begin interviews as early as mid to late July. Some will start a little bit later. So we'll hear from our panelists today what their processes are, and you'll get a sense of how it's a little different at the different institutions. So you'll wait to hear from the school regarding the possibility of an interview. It is going to be up to the different schools whether or not they accept letters of interest, letter of intents, whether they accept update letters or not. And we're going to put this back on your shoulders to look at the website, figure out, is this a school that accepts updates from applicants or not? Do they accept updates blanketly? Do you have to be interviewed? You know, where in the process is it? So let's say you've completed your interview. And so now we go on to the next phase of the process, which will be the committee. And again, this will vary per program as well. Again, you'll hear from our panelists today. Some schools have set meeting times. So you interview today, you'll hear from us 2 weeks from now. And you'll hear from us, you're either accepted or waitlisted, and that's, you know, plain and simple. Other schools will have a different process in place. Maybe their committee meets once a month, maybe their committee meets every week, but they don't make admissions decisions until they've reviewed a large number of applications. So again, we're asking you to be patient here as the committee deliberates, carefully and thoroughly reviewing all of the materials that they've received, so they can identify those students that are most mission aligned to their institution. And then you'll get these decisions. And as I've mentioned earlier, the decisions will vary. You know, you'll get an acceptance, you can be waitlisted, you can be placed on a holding category until the school makes their decision. So this piece will vary again from institution to institution. And the most important part of it is for you to be patient, for you to be cordial and courteous, and engage with the school. Reach out to the school and see where they are in the process and how receptive they are, again, to receiving additional information from you. Then you'll get a decision, right? And so the decision will be an amazing one, which you want, and it'll be acceptance, and you'll move on to the other things that the school needs for you to be onboarded. Or it may be that you're waitlisted and you wait a little bit longer, and generally you'll have an idea of where you are with the institution at various points in the process, right? So oftentimes when the interview season is completed for a school and they're no longer offering interviews, you'll probably get an update from them at that point. And then you may have to wait until their waitlist process opens up, and then you'll get communication from them about the waitlist process opening. And then the next piece of it might be that their class is matriculated and they're thanking you for your application, and you'll be thinking about reapplying. And I can put a plug in for the next session that's happening today as well, which is a panel of individuals who will talk about the reapplication process. But that's what's going to happen in the life cycle of an application and the various points. So we know it's a lot of hard work. And again, we're going to ask you to be a little bit more patient, but this whole marathon of applying and getting into med school is years, but the application part itself is about 1 year from the start until you make the decision. We're going to answer your questions at the end, so I'm sure you've got some questions about this, and I do see there's some Q&A coming up, so I'll ask you to be patient. I really want to hand it over to our panelists right now so that you can hear from them. Our first panelist is Dr. Lynch, and Dr. Lynch is going to speak with us about the philosophy of medicine. How do you understand what it really takes to be a physician and what it'll be like? And Dr. Lynch, if you wouldn't mind, please share how this plays into the application review for you.
Thank you, Layla, and thanks for everybody who's joining us today. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Before you, what you see is the philosophy of medicine for the College of Medicine here at the University of Florida. What I really want to talk about is medicine as a profession. And so for all of you who are applying, as I talk to applicants over the years, one of the things that I hear them say again and again is they know a lot about, or they're spending so much time doing all of the things you need to do to be a physician that some of them haven't given the time that they wish they could to actually thinking about what it means to be a physician. And so the way I have 3 questions I'd like to ask you, and I'm asking you these not to answer them because I could talk a half an hour or an hour on each topic, but it's just sprinkle in your mind and let you think about it to all my young colleagues. First is, what is the soul of the profession? What is it all about? The second is, how is it that we as a medical school, as an education community, can help you become that sort of physician? And the final question I want you to think about is, do you think medicine is a calling? Let's go back to the first one. So this is the history of medicine. And I will tell you, when I ask what's medicine about, I hear all sorts of things. It's about, public health. Yes. It's about the health system. It's about equity. All these things matter. But if you actually go back 2,400 years to the original Hippocratic Oath, and every medical school that I'm aware of has some version of it, I'd like to share with you one particular part of the University of Florida's Hippocratic Oath. And it reads like this: I will remember with gratitude and humility those whose illness or injury provided examples from which I learned, and in their honor I will continue the pursuit of knowledge. Now, I still to this day find that a remarkably beautiful and ennobling reason to be in the profession. And in fact, it doesn't matter where you go in the history of medicine. If you go from 2,400 years ago, you can go to the Persian philosopher, theologian, Muslim physician Avicenna in the turn of the century, about 1000 AD, Maimonides in the 12th century, North African Jewish philosopher, physician, Thomas Sydenham, or our own William Osler. The answer is always the same. And it's best summarized. I'm going to read one quote to you. Forgive me for doing this, but it's he's from my hero. His name is Ed Pellegrino, and this is what he says about medicine specifically. The act specific to medicine, that which makes it medicine and thereby distinguishes it both from science and art, is a decision about what is right and good for a particular patient. The central and irreducible concern is this patient now with this set of needs. arising in this particular illness. It is a practical decision taken in the best interest of a particular person, not in the interest of new knowledge, of society, or of the physician. And I want us to try as a profession to hold on to that. And that's one of the things at University of Florida we actually care deeply about. So if you'll accept that that's the soul of the profession, the next question that sort of comes up is, okay, well, how do we help you as an educational institution get there? There would be two basic ideas. First of all, I can assure you that the art of medicine, and I would like to put it this way, that the art of medicine is, the science of medicine, I have to know all of the medical facts and procedures correctly, but the art of medicine, I have to know each person I care for in such a way that I know why it matters to them. And if I do that, if I'm going to teach you to do that, I promise it's not going to be through lectures and readings. There's two basic strategies. One is to have a community where you actually care for each other, where you're caring, even as a medical student in the classes, you're looking after your classmates, you're actually genuinely concerned about each other. And then when you walk into the clinics, you have a natural tendency to look after others. And then finally, secondly, you have to have mentors. And these are the role models. And we have wonderful role models at our institution. And then you'll find yourself in a position where you're going to be in a small group with 5 to 7 other people who are very different than you, with the best teachers in the College of Medicine who are there helping you. And the final question is medicine a calling? I would like to suggest to you that it is, and it matters. And it's something like this, that the patients have to be well cared for, that's the science, and they have to feel well cared for, and that's the art. And so that's a long background. So how do we go about figuring that out? Everybody in medical school who applies says something like, I love science and I want to help people. Doesn't get you a quick interview to say you want to be an unpleasant person and you're in it for the money. I can assure you of that. So what we're trying to do in our application process, as most of my colleagues are, we're trying to look at the whole person. Holistic review is a little bit of a buzzword, but I think most of us here take it pretty seriously. Metrics have some value, they matter. Medical school is hard, but I want to know how you spent your time. I want to know if you know how to write. George Orwell once said that if you can't write, you can't think. And if you can't think, other people will do your thinking for you. So when you're looking at our application, for instance, you're going to, the applicants tell me that our secondary questions are a little bit different than those of a lot of other schools. So I hope that's helpful, and even as you're going through this process, I would encourage you to keep coming back to these questions. Why am I doing this? What am I stepping into? And you'll find that it'll help you get through the process. And Layla, I think I'm out of time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lynch. That was very informative and helpful to understand the philosophy of medicine and why are you going into this, because students ask that a lot. Okay, now we get to move to Dr. Nanda Gopal, and she will talk to us. First, let me share the mission of the program with you really quick. And I'm being a little clunky about moving in between slides, but that's okay. I hope you'll forgive me. Do I have the right slide up?
It's the beginning of the deck.
Oh, so that's the wrong slide then. Apologies for my clunkiness. I'm having some difficulty. Okay, here we go. All right, so what you see before you is the general overview mission statement of the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine. Dr. Nanda Gopal, you wanted to talk to the candidates about how do they know that they're a right fit for the school? So let the students know that, please.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Radha Nandagopal, and I am the admissions committee chair at the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine, and I'm a pediatric endocrinologist. We are a community-based medical school based primarily in Eastern Washington, but we are a statewide institution with multiple regional campuses. So the reason I'm talking to you all is because, unlike my esteemed panelists, I am not actually an admissions officer. I am a faculty member who is an admissions committee chair, and have spent a lot of time over the last 7 years recruiting faculty and kind of getting a buy-in for our process. And one of the things that we often see is that folks don't necessarily know the school that they're applying to. And we find that people really want to be a doctor, and they want to do all the things that Dr. Lynch just talked about. And they sort of cast such a wide net, not realizing that maybe what they're trying to do is, fit a square peg into kind of a trapezoidal hole. And so they're not really able to tell us really, truly why they meet the mission. You'll find that some medical schools, and I can speak for ours, are very mission aligned. So if you were to go to our website, medicine.wsu.edu, for example, you will find that unless you have very strong ties to, which are specifically defined, or are a proven resident of the state of Washington, you won't get a secondary application. You also have to meet certain metrics in order to get through to our secondary application. But after that, our process is very different from many other medical schools, and we blind our entire committee for the whole process, from the time they see your application all the way through interviews and full review. We blind the applicants, the admission committee membership to your GPA and your MCAT scores. So we'll sometimes get the question of, well, wait, I had a 4.0 and I didn't get an interview at your school, but I got an interview at so many other schools. That's because the admissions committee doesn't see your GPA, and we don't make decisions based on your GPA. Once your GPA and MCAT thresholds are met, you're in the system. And now we are doing something called holistic review, and we're reviewing you for other attributes. And you can read about more of those on our website. So I want to go back to what Dr. Amiri said, which was get to know the school and really get to, really start to understand what is it that that particular school wants, and make sure that you're going to be a fit for that school if you apply. Otherwise, it's a lot of time and money on your part. And since I have a few minutes, I'll just talk also about some questions that we typically get, which is, how do you get experience if you don't have connections to physicians? And we know that in the COVID pandemic, it's been really hard. Shadowing has really been shut down. So really thinking about things like virtual shadowing, talking to physicians, doing other aspects of care in the healthcare sector. So scribing, for example, we understand that many people cannot afford to spend all of their time volunteering. So paid employment in healthcare and observing what the healthcare process looks like and what medicine looks like. So look at the different schools and really get to know what is it that they're considering. And I see a question in the chat about how are MCAT scores considered? Is it make or break or simply a benchmark? I can only speak for our school. If you look at our website, medicine.wsu.edu, and click on admissions, you'll see there that we have data-informed thresholds that come from the AAMC, and we are figuring out sort of, what are markers of success. So if you have a lower MCAT score, you need a higher GPA. If you have a higher GPA, you need a lower MCAT score to meet those thresholds, and we're fairly strict about those. And then the other question I wanted to talk about was sort of community college experience. So a lot of people ask us, what about community colleges? Is it okay if I've been to a community college? And again, that's very subjective on the part of the admissions committees. In ours in particular, because of our sort of extreme mission alignment, we are very focused on who's going to go back and serve in the communities that need it in the state of Washington. And so we are very aligned with considering those applicants who show us that they've traveled a distance, and community college is part of that. Dr. Amiri, I'll turn it back to you in case there are other questions, and I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat, but maybe you can help us to moderate which ones to take live. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll switch to Mr. Essman now, and attendees, if you could just drop your questions in the Q&A for us, we'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. Now, lest you think that I can't learn, let me see if I can do my screen share properly this time so that what happened last time doesn't happen. And I think I've got this. All right, so Mr. Essman, if you could help our attendees understand how they can make their applications stand out.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Essman. I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm going to talk with you about how do you stand out as an applicant when everyone, seemingly everyone, has kind of a similar profile. Now, I'm looking at the number of participants in this, and there's close to 1,500 people here. And if I were to ask you, like, okay, raise your hand if you've done shadowing. Okay, hands go up. Raise your hand if you've done research. Hands go up. How about volunteering? Raise your hand, and what about if you've worked in a hospital or, a lot of hands would be going up, right? Because there's kind of a similar profile for students that want to go to medical school, which makes sense. You've done a lot of the similar things. So how does one kind of start to stand out? And I think I'm speaking globally. I'm not speaking just for Case Western, but I think my colleagues on this webinar would agree, and ones that are at other schools, is one of the ways you can help yourself stand out is the way you write about things that you've done, particularly when you're talking about your activities and experiences section. So that's a part of AMCAS, and you get 15 slots or places where you can share your work history and activities and research and all kinds of things that you've done. There are tons of categories to choose from, and you get to pick the categories of how you want to classify them. Each of these experiences, they give you 700 characters to write about that experience. Now that's like writing a mini essay. So this is very different. So if you are a US student and you applied to college, you did the Common App. When you did the Common application, they gave you 150 characters to write about your experiences as a high school student. But now AMCAS is like the Common application on steroids. So you get 700 characters to write about your experiences, and then you get to pick 3 of them as you designate as your most meaningful. And you are then given 1,325 additional characters to write about that. So this is where you really need to take the opportunity to let your application then come to life by using these characters. Well, what do you write about? Well, you want to share with them or share with admissions what it is that you did, what your role was, and then get into the self-reflections. What did you take away from these experiences? How did you learn? Did you acquire new skills? How did you grow? What challenged you? Was it people in the group that challenged you? Let's say you were in part of a committee or an organization where the people in there was kind of pushing back, or was it public speaking, or was it time management with all these experiences? So that's really an opportunity to show us that, one, you have the ability to self-reflect, you have self-awareness, you have growth mindset, and you're not perfect. And so I think I want to emphasize that you don't need to come across as being perfect. We know that as a young person, you're still growing in a number of different ways. And so are we. I think all of us on this call could probably talk about something we're trying to improve upon in our own lives and get better at. And so we're all doing that in some way, shape, or form across the spectrum of our lives. So you don't need to come across as saying that I've got this all figured out. I have the best time management skills. I've never screwed up. Everybody loves my ideas. It's okay to say that, you learned a lot along the way from some of these experiences. So that's one place where you can start to stand out. So don't underestimate that part of the process. It really takes some time. And so it takes some self-reflections. And so one thing I might recommend to you is that if you are just embarking on this process or on the pre-med track, start a journal, start a living document, maybe like a Google Doc or a Word doc or a handwritten journal, and start to document down some of these experiences that you've had and write down people's names and contact information now. Keep those things going. And so then as you come home, say at the end of the day, and you're just volunteering the emergency department today, and you had an interaction with a patient that really stuck with you, or you observed something between a physician and patient or nursing staff that really resonated with you, write that story down. And then when you come to the application process in a year, 2 years, 3 years, or however long it takes, you can come back to those stories and look at those again with a fresh lens. And maybe the way you saw it a couple of years ago, you're seeing it differently now. So that's where it's going to really help you in keeping that kind of journal and that kind of document. Then it comes to another place where you can help yourself stand out is in the school-specific essays. These are primarily in secondary applications. Every secondary application is different. Case Western's, our prompts are different than Vermont's, which are different than Washington State's, which is different than Florida's. So get ready to be kind of essayed to death. I'm sorry, you're going to be writing a lot of essays as you embark on this process and having to think about all your moral and ethical dilemmas that you've experienced over the last several years. But this is important to us. And this kind of comes back to that mission-driven statement that Dr. Nana Gopal talked about, and it's kind of resonating with what the school is looking for. So I know it's a lot of writing, but take the time to write those essays that are school specific, because that's what we're reading, because there's something in there that we're looking for that means a lot to us. And lastly, or I have two more things. But what about optional essays? Some med schools have optional essays in their secondary applications, and they can range from all different kinds of prompts, like optional, like tell us why you decided to apply to our school, or optional, is there anything else in the application that hasn't been captured that you just want to share? So those are, think of that as another opportunity. Now, my kids, they have it rough here. Their dad's in admissions. You know what their dad tells them? It might be optional for other people, but it's not optional for you. So that's another place where you can stand out a little bit, where you take the time to write, another response that, again, can maybe help you stand out a little bit. So if you're looking for that edge, maybe that's where you find it. And you share a little bit more about what prompted you to apply to that score, depending what the prompt is. And lastly, one more thing, letters of recommendation. Try to find people that that know you well and can write objectively about you. And if you can find a letter writer that can write, that knows you well, they can also add some color and shape to your application, because they can share things with us that you probably aren't going to come out and write about. Meaning, like, you're not going to come out and write, they can write about you and say, wow, they're an awesome team member. They're really reliable. They're very dependable. They're always punctual coming to the lab, or they have great social skills. What an amazing communicator. Great integrity, so they can tell us other things about you that you're probably not saying in some of your experiences sections, okay, or in some of your essays. So while we're going through the Q&A, I'm going to drop a couple links in the chat or in the Q&A, both about some tips from the AAMC on giving a guide to letter writers, and also the 2023 AMCAS guidelines book is out there. I don't think the 2024 one is out yet, but if you want to get a sneak peek at what AMCAS looks like and all the information that they're going to be asking you for, it doesn't change too much from year to year. I'll put that in there to give you a little preview. So that's I went 8 minutes, but there's my info. So thank you.
Amazing, Christian. Thank you so much. And I think all of us here on the panel have had that question, how do I make my application stand out? So lots of fantastic advice from you. Thank you. So if I could have all our panelists come back on the camera, and Dr. Lynch, I didn't give you an opportunity to share your credentials and your role with the institution. So if you don't mind really doing that really quick for us, so our attendees know where you are.
I'm a medical oncologist here. I'm a lymphoma specialist, and I've been in medical education now for almost 35 years and served as the Dean of Admissions here for the last 12 years.
Thank you so much. So I'm scanning the questions. They're rolling in. So we have about 84, 85 questions with not enough time to go. But one thing that came up repeatedly was traditional versus non-traditional students. How do you look at them? What should they do? And so I think that your responses will be similar, but I feel each of you will have something unique based on what your school looks like. So if I could have each of you, Christian, I'll start with you just because of where you are on my screen. I'll go from Christian to Retha to Jay. If you don't mind just touching on that really quick for our attendees.
About how non-traditional students are viewed at our school. Well,
Exactly.
here's the thing. Case Western coined a phrase about 50, 60 years ago called bent arrows, and where students are on one pathway and they make a turn and they're still pointed in the right direction and coming to medicine. And so we've always valued non-traditional students at our school, and primarily because of the way our curriculum is designed. It's a lot of small group team-based work where you're around intimate learning environments in small group work. And so everybody's bringing something different to the table, life experiences, expertise, backgrounds. So non-traditional students add additional dynamic and enhance the learning environment because some of them are coming with different career experiences and a certain level of sometimes professionalism that can rub off on some other students. If they've been out in the workforce for 10 years and they've worked with different people from other career pathways and in hierarchy of an organization, they can sometimes bring a different level of some other executive functioning skills, if you want to call it that, that can help under some of the younger students, kind of pick up on some of those things. So we're big fans. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll echo that. We're also big fans, and also I think non-traditional, whatever that word now means, kind of really they shine in our process because it's all about the road that they've traveled and how did they make the decisions that they made to get there. And I've seen going along with this some folks who are talking about people in the military who've been in the military for so long. Actually, if you look at Washington State University particularly, that's one of our sort of mission critical factors because our military and veteran community is so underserved. And so we're specifically looking for people who have that kind of leadership experience, for example, and sometimes it's a lot easier to get that kind of experience when you're quote unquote non-traditional or you've already been in another career. So that is absolutely not a deficit in our system at all, and probably is an asset.
I have nothing to add. Beautifully stated. Agree 100%.
We just had one question that came in at the end. So we've been thinking about non-traditionals as students who've done other things, applicants who've done other things. What about if a person's applying really young and they consider themselves non-traditional because of how young they are in the application process? Christian, do you want to take that?
Okay, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Here's the thing. Medical school admissions offices and any admissions office is not supposed to take age into consideration when reviewing applications. I will say, though, I've seen some applicants over the years, it's a very, very small minority, but they're like 15, 16 years old. And I will tell you that their application is not as robust as those that are graduating from college, as far as like experiences. And you can tell from sometimes the application that while they're very bright academically, some of their other activities just doesn't show the amount of growth that you see in students that are applying at the end of college. So that's not something that we've typically seen. It doesn't happen very often, but that's just where those type of applicants have come up short, at least at our school.
Thank you. Retha, would you mind, we have a few questions about community. How do you foster community in a med school? The attendees feel that the environment is very competitive.
Leila, do you think that means in med school or amongst applicants? Oh, in med school.
Yeah,
I mean, my job now is to foster community among the faculty, but I think our medical school and our Office of Admissions and Student Affairs does a really nice job of it depends, lots of different schools do things differently. I can only speak for the one I work at, which is we have, for example, pass and satisfactory as our grades in the pre-clerkship period so that there's less competitiveness. We encourage collaboration. We have team-based, case-based learning. There's a lot of community campus work. So we're trying to really engage students in teams, in communities from the get-go. They have the opportunity to participate in scholarship that can be group work. So I think it's just really sorting out the culture of the medical school if you're lucky enough to have a choice of where to go. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Jay, I'm going to direct this question to you only because you've so far have been in medical education for over 20 years. So one of the attendees is asking, what do you say to individuals who want to apply to medical school, but also are seeing physicians who are burning out because of the weight of the work?
Yeah, thank you. Burnout's a big issue. In fact, most people are burned out talking about burnout. Actually, it's such a common topic. But we've already touched on a couple of things. If you even look at the National Academy of Medicine's 300-page tome on burnout from November of 2019, there's a wonderful cutout. Basically, it says that burnout is caused by the loss of connection with ourselves, with our colleagues, and with our patients. Because we want to get the diagnoses right, but what we all truly crave is to actually be in community with others, to have those relationships. And those relationships are related to the ability to be face-to-face, the ability to be vulnerable with one another, okay? And so I talk a lot about my own failures when I'm talking to students because I've got 35 years of them all racked up and I remember every one of them. And I do that not to try to be, oversharing, but rather to sort of let people realize, just as Christian was saying, we're all a work in progress here. And if we can join this work in progress, we can actually even discuss burnout. So that's the first thing. The second thing is actually it's been studied if people who see medicine as a calling, and interestingly, in the one study that looked at this, 42% of physicians see it as a calling. They are protected from burnout. They have more zest. That's the sort of endpoint they were looking at, and they find more joy in their work and even more balance between home and work life, which all of us are striving for. So I would say that if we focus on the right things, medicine is hard. It is not a safe space. Anybody who's listening who thinks medicine is a safe space, please find another career. You're not here. You're crazy if you think it's safe. Every time I walk into a room, I don't know what's going to happen with the patient. But it's the most beautiful and joyful and difficult thing you could ever do, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jay, for that response. We have a lot of questions about metrics. And as you can imagine, some of them are very specific. But would each of you be willing to talk a little bit about metrics in the context of holistic review? So we have questions like, I was a student athlete, my grades hurt a little bit, or my courses are old. So if you could just help our attendees understand metrics in the context of holistic review, please.
I'm happy to take a
Thank you.
first stab at that one. So in our system, as I've mentioned to all of you at the Washington State University, we blind our admissions committee to metrics, but we can see your transcript. We just can't calculate your GPA really. And so all we use the transcript for is to look at trajectory. So if you have, sort of really improved and your GPA was particularly low, for example, which we wouldn't see, but we see consistent improvement, that really is good, right? And the committee is very the committee is very attuned to that, and we're not slicing and dicing by is your GPA a 3.8 or a 3.2 or a 3.6. It's more overall, as they stayed in college, or maybe there's some exception about something terrible that happened. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. That something terrible that happened, during college, and then grades picked up after that. We're just able to kind of see that. And that's really helpful in interpreting the application. So I would just say, pay attention to what the website says about metrics, and also reach out to the admissions offices to have a conversation with them if you're really interested in that school.
Thank you so much. Anything else to add from our other panelists, or should we move on to a different question?
I'll add one more thing if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Our job is we have to look into a crystal ball to see if somebody is a viable medical student, and it's not easy. And so when it comes to metrics, we try to put everything into context. Like Radha said, that sometimes people have had situations in life that happen while they're in college, and that's rough because life throws you curveballs, no matter if you're in college or you're out of college. And so we try to put this stuff into context and to see what else is going on. Maybe you worked 20, 30 hours a week to put yourself through school, and that's why it might attribute to a lower GPA. So we try to read these things and read into them. And that's why sharing and writing about stuff and not leaving, we try to leave no stone unturned, but in the end, it's not easy. We still have far fewer interview slots than we have applicants. So I try to show you that you're putting your best foot forward, and we'll do our job on our end to try to make sure we give you a fair shot too. But I'll tell you, the four of us sitting here, we have to make tough decisions, and we always don't do it alone. We're not like, we're not a one woman show or one man show. We work with committees.
Thank you so much, Christian. We have a few questions about the culture. So how can applicants understand the culture of your institutions and know if that culture is a good fit for them? Jay, would you like to take that one?
Sure. It's a great question. I'm actually sitting here trying to figure out the best. I mean, the best way to sample a culture is to be there and be part of it. Okay, so that's why on-site interviews were so important for our program leading up to COVID. And I'm sure every other school like us have tried to project onto our virtual boards, advertisements, websites, whatever you want to call them, some version of our culture. But I think the bottom line is you've got to just visit and experience the places. But there are certain, just like Radha was saying, if my medical school happens to be interested in producing primary care physicians, if that's my mission of my medical school, then I've got to make sure that what I want aligns with that. And I don't know, I'd be curious what the other folks think. Our culture is what it is. We have a culture of what we call hospitality. We want everybody to come to feel like they belong here. And I think my favorite thing that I hear from our students is, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I love my classmates. And that to me is a win. And yeah, for the lack of time, I think I'm just going to stop, and I'd love to hear what my colleagues think.
I think sometimes you can glean things from websites and resources such as the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements Guide. If it's a pass-fail type of environment in the grading system in the first 2 years, that might give you some insight that maybe it's not super competitive as far as like they're trying to foster a collaborative learning environment. That might be something to look at. And oftentimes in the MSAR, people will, the schools will write kind of like what their culture is like there, what they try to foster within their classes. So you can try to glean some of those things. But like Dr. Lynch said, sometimes it's just having to wait to go to those interview days to kind of get the vibe, do the vibe check. And even if it's on Zoom, I've met students that can still pick up, they feel like they felt really welcomed and that they belong, even from Zoom. So I think we've all kind of adapted in that way.
Bertha, did you want to add to the comments, or do you feel complete with that?
I feel, yep, just getting to know the school, and you make the culture. So go add to it.
So we've got several questions here about mental health. So one perspective of it is, how much of this should I share on my application? And then the other piece of it is, what type of support do you have for students with disabilities or mental health concerns while they're in medical school? So we have 8 minutes left. If we could split that up for our panelists to share those two things, and then I'll ask for one bit of advice before we close out our session. Brother, can we start with you?
Yeah, and you cut out for a second. Can you repeat the question, Layla?
Sure. So there's two pieces to the question. One is, how much of a mental health concern can I share in my application with the committee? And then the second question is, how much support and what type of support does your institution have for students with disabilities or students who have mental health concerns?
Oh, great. Thank you. I just heard half of that. So, I think you have to decide what you're comfortable sharing. I can only speak for our process, which is, a lot of the sort of road traveled by a lot of our applicants does have to do with mental health concerns, and the pandemic, worsened all of that for physicians and for applicants and for everybody along the path, right? So I think it depends on how you talk about it and how you talk about your growth and how you're managing it. It's a medical condition. People bring up other medical conditions, so you should feel comfortable bringing that up. Can I assure you that there will be no bias across any medical schools, across all the committees in the United States? Of course not, right? So you have to hope that the committee process, ours, we do a lot of bias training for our committee, and we do a lot of sort of vetting, what constitutes as a no-go versus, and there's really nothing in our process that absolutely not, this gets thrown out. So I would say be your authentic self. I think what we're reading in the chat is, should I hide my special interest? Should I hide this? Should I hide that? And be yourself. I mean, you can't hide who you are and then end up in medical school and then switch your entire personality. So be yourself, and the medical school should want you for who that is. And then I think on the other side, yes, accreditation requirements require us to support students with disabilities, and certainly we are recognizing in medicine, I think we're a little bit behind in medical education, but we're recognizing a lot more that we have neurodivergent learners, we have people who have physical and other unseen disabilities, and medical schools are working to support those more. But I think that the undergraduate environment is a little bit ahead of us in that, and so you may have to self-advocate to get what you need, but legally you're entitled to that support.
Thank you so much for that thorough response. And I don't know if you can see all of the hearts and claps and celebrations that are coming up for our amazing panelists today. So we've got 5 minutes. I was hoping that each of you would be willing to share a bit of advice or words of encouragement to our almost 2,000 attendees that are here today with us. Christian, you're unmuted, so if I can start with you.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing is the fact that you're here. If you're sitting here watching this today and participating in not only our conversation, but the ones that follow us, it tells us you're serious and that you're on the right track. You're doing the best you can to collect information and try to pull all this together. We understand that admissions can sometimes feel like a black box and that you are going in blindly, but there are people like us out there trying to share with you these insights and advice. And so I would encourage you to keep going to events like this, whether it's virtual through the AAMC or on campus through your advising office, or if you don't have advising at your institution, to go through the AAMC's opportunities. A lot of these are free. And so to try to seek out that advice through reliable sources that are in this process. So that's my takeaway for today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christian. Radha, can I call on you next?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we've said most of it. Be yourself, be authentic. Don't try to fit yourself into a program. For example, ours, if you write to us and say, I just love the Seattle airport and I'd love to be in the state of Washington. I mean, that's not a good use of your time, and it's not a good use of your money, right? So figure out what the school is and be authentic, and then the school should want you for who you are. And I would say reach out and ask for help. Admissions, medicine.admissions@wsu.edu. It's on our website. I'm sure that my colleagues also feel the same. There's lots of information. People want to give you information. Go to recruiting fairs, get to know the places. I would say, and be yourself.
Perfect. Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much. Jay, you're next.
I'm speechless because I have very little to add to my wonderful colleagues' descriptions. I would only say two things. Number one, in relate to the mental health stuff, you don't want to go to a place that's going to hold it against you that you had mental health issues. So there's almost a beautiful Darwinian selection. Be yourself. Each time each of us becomes sick or a member of our family becomes sick, it can make us a better physician. And if I allow it to. So I want to hear from you whatever struggles you've had, how that's helping shape who you are as a human being, and how it's going to shape your professional identity. And each of you has a story, and as we think about that, every patient has a story, and there's a beautiful correlation between a system of admissions that selects people because we think your story is compelling, that allows you to then become the physician who will care for each patient on the room. And it's a wonderful process. It's hard. Stick with it, and we try to be as fair as we can.
So Jay, a question just popped up about this since you were addressing disability there. The attendee is asking if there's a way to have an understanding of what that culture is. Culture around disability and physicians with disabilities.
It's a great question. Layla, you may be in the best position to answer that. You are Christian. I mean, we talk about it on our website, so and we're very open about the idea of wanting people, diversity in the largest sense of the word. So that's probably where I'd start.
Perfect. And Christian, one last question, because we got a whole bunch of questions for international students. So we got another call. I think of our 3 schools here, maybe you're the only one that accepts international students, if I'm not mistaken. We have 1 minute. Can you give
There's
us-
a handful of medical schools in the country that accept applications from international students. At CASE, we evaluate them the same way as we evaluate U.S. citizens. The only difference comes into play. We don't have different metric requirements for international students. Really, the only place that comes in the difference is for financial aid, because international students are not eligible for federal aid. So that's where look at each school that accepts them, international students, and I think you'll find that we all kind of look at them very similarly as we do to U.S. citizens.
I want to thank all of our panelists again. It was really wonderful seeing you here today and hearing your insights. And as you can see, again, the love emojis and the thumbs up and the claps and the celebrations are just being showered on you. Thanks for taking time out of your day, for being here with us. I'm going to reach out to the folks at the AAMC. There's over 100 questions that we didn't get an opportunity to answer. If we're able to get those questions and answer them, we will see if there's a location that we can post them for you. Good luck to all of you, and we look forward to seeing your application.
Great
Thanks,
job,
everyone.
Layla. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to my fellow colleagues and all my future colleagues.
Bye, everyone.